Hi, welcome to the Warhammies with me, Seb. Today we're going to be painting purity seals and the books of Greylight models. Painting purity seals is split into two parts. You've got the paper and then the waxy seal. To paint the paper, we're going to be using Rakarth Flesh, Seraphim Sepia, and Pallid Witch Flesh. For the waxy seals, we're going to be using Mephiston Red, Rykon Flesh Shade, Evil Sun Scarlet, and Wild Rider Red. We're only going to be using 3 brushes. That's a medium layer brush and a small layer brush. I also have just a basic Citadel starter brush, and this is just to apply washes to the purity seals and other small details. First things first, for the parchment, we're going to want to apply a nice layer of Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to be using the small layer brush for this, and all we're going to be doing is just making sure that seal is covered. Now, take your time on this method because we don't want to ruin any of the silver armour that we just painted. Since we're applying quite a light colour onto a black base, it might require a few layers. But at this stage, we're just applying little layers all over the seal. I tend to like going horizontal along purity seals, because I find that gives you a much better coating than going vertical. You might have to wait one bit to dry before you can get the next layer on. So if that's the case, just move on to another seal on the model. So for this example, we've got one in the legs here. It's going to be quite tricky to get to. But like the last stage, you're going to have to move your model around. Don't worry if you make any mistakes, we can always go back over the silver. Just take your time and be delicate. Remember to catch the base of the purity seals. As with the model based in black, these will stick out once the model's done. It's not necessary to do the inside of the seal. However, as long as you get some of the paint on there, it should help hide the fact that we're not doing the whole of the inside. This is the first layer of the purity seals done. Just wait for the paint to dry. To save a little bit of time on these models when we're painting, we're actually going to be basing the pages in the book in Rakarth Flesh as well. So while the seals are waiting to dry, we can go ahead and paint the first layer of them too, still using the small layer brush. So we have the book here. What we're going to want to do is just apply a nice thin layer. I appreciate with the angle of the book is at. I find sometimes it's easier just to kind of fold the model upside down and just sweep this way. The main thing is make sure these layers are quite thin, as we don't want to clog up the details on the small book. Just make sure to get all the way up to that skull as well in the centre. But try and avoid using too many brush strokes, as on lighter colours they tend to show up. So Grey Knights will typically have some sort of book on the chest, and then we've got the one on the shoulder pad. So same sort of process, just go down. And again, just try not to have your paints too thick because you don't want to take away the detail. You've got some quite small points to try and reach on these books, so just take your time and be delicate. Now the one perk is, if we make a mistake and accidentally clip a bit of the book that's supposed to be red, don't worry, you can always go back over. normally 2 thin layers is enough to get it going. However, just be careful not to do what I just did there, and come back to it when it's slightly wet, as you'll end up pulling the paint from one of the areas. This is more important for the seals rather than the books, as the books we're going to be going back over in a different colour as well. And this base layer just helps that brighter layer later on. Now we've waited long enough for the beauty seals to dry, we're going to be applying a shade of Seraphim Sepia all over these seals. The books will not be having a shade of Seraphim Sepia, only the seals. You need to load up a brush with Seraphim Sepia. Now I'm just using one of the beginner starter brushes that came in the set, but any brush will do fine, as long as it's not going to absolutely swamp and swarm the model. So just apply it all over the seal. I want it to pool a little bit as well. Let's get the one on the inside of the leg there. Now this will turn the seals quite sort of orangey for now. However, don't worry, trust the process, and it'll be okay. Now, like any shade paint, the importance is obviously waiting for the right amount of time to dry. There we go. We've applied Seraphim Sepia to the purity seals. Now, while waiting for the Seraphim Sepia to dry, we can do a very similar thing that we did at the last stage. And this is just to cover the books in another additional paint. And the reason we're doing this is because it uses very similar paints to that of the purity seals, and it's just making sure that we're making an efficient use of our time when painting our minis. So, just take the palette Witch Flesh. Now I personally like my books slightly lighter than the seals, just to add a little bit of definition. So I then cover the whole book in Pallid Witch Flesh, just to add a little bit of a brighter detail so they don't get mistaken for purity seals. Just be delicate around the edges, but don't worry if you go over too far, as we're going to be going back over and neatening up when we get to this phase with the red paints. And there we go. Just one single coat of Pallid Witch Flesh should be enough, with the base of Rock Hard Flesh helping the whites to stick out. But we can touch that up again in the next stages when we go on to the reds, as it's a similar sort of process of while waiting for the seals to dry, we can go on to the books. Now that the shade paint is relatively dry on the seals, what we're going to do is go back over with a bit of Rock Hard Flesh. We want to try and catch the areas where it hasn't pulled into the recesses. Get those nice flat edges on the seals. Sort of anywhere where the light should catch or the parchment should be a little bit brighter is where we're going to want to focus on. Try not to go too deep near the recesses, as we still want that shade paint to add the definition between the two seals. We want to focus on just on the flatter edges, which catch the light. I'll just do that over each seal until you're happy with the effect. Now that the Rock Hard Flesh has dried on the seals, we're just going to be applying a nice little layer of Pallid Witch Flesh. Now this is going to be focused mainly on the edges of the seal to add a kind of dried paper effect. Let's just catch the edge of the seals. So almost similar vein to edge highlighting. We just want to catch the edge. If you see any cracks or tears in the seal, there's a very small one here, what we're going to want to do is just try and get a bit more Pallid Witch Flesh around there to really help highlight that tear in the seal. You also want to just add a little bit more definition on some of those raised points which really catch the light. So the one down at the leg, as you can see, we've just caught the edges and the raised areas which catch the light. I've probably applied a little bit too much to the shoulder there. However, I won't go back over it because I don't mind the effect. But now we can go on to applying to the reds. When applying the reds to the waxy seals, we're going to be running through a very similar method. We'll be applying a base of Mephiston Red first, shading it with Frightcon Flesh Shade, touching up with Evil Sun's Scarlet onto the areas that catch the majority of the lights, like if you can see the top of this skull, and then we'll be catching just a few little corners with Wild Rider Red, just to really make it pop. Firstly, we're going to apply base of Mephiston Red. So for this seal, the first layer isn't overly important. The main thing is we don't want to do what I've just done there and get it on the seal. But it's okay, we can always go back and fix it. Just be careful not to clog the small details on the seals, like the skulls. Also be careful not to go into the lettering, because we still want those recesses to be very dark. Just remember to catch the edges of the purity seals, because similar to the parchment, it will stick out like a sore thumb if they're black. And there we go. First layer of the reds applied to the seals. We're going to have to touch up there just a little bit, or I've gone slightly too far over. We're now just going to move on to a little shade of Frightcon Flesh Shade onto these seals. So just take whatever brush you've been using. All we're going to want to do is just get that seal covered. It helps apply that waxy look as well. Just try not to pull too much in there because we still don't want to lose the detail. Similar to the previous stage, what we're going to be doing is just applying Mephiston Red to the books. We've got the book on the shoulder and the book on the chest. Some other models might have books on the knee pads that we'll have to focus on, but this one only has 2. So we'll start on the one on the shoulder first. Main thing is just make sure you're catching it where you need to. So on the edge here, just a nice thin layer. Now I normally have to go back over, or I catch it where I don't mean to. If you do, absolutely fine. Is we'll go back over with a bit of Pallid Witch Flesh to touch it up. So as you can see, making quite a bit of a mess. But again, it's quite alright. The main thing is just making sure that the red book is covered in the areas it needs to be. Similar story for the one on the chest. Just make sure it's not caused too much damage. Just be careful about the lettering, because we don't want to be going into that. Just rotate the model, make hitting every angle as easy as possible. This stage, I normally find, tends to require a little bit of touching up, just because my hands aren't as steady as I'd like them to be. We're just going to hop back into a little bit of Pallid Witch Flesh, touch up these books. You might need to apply just a few layers onto certain bits, as it can come out a little bit pinky. Our book's already looking better already, just with a brief little touch up. Now that the Requiem flesh shade is dry in the purity seals, we're just going to grab some Evil Sunz Scarlet, just to make sure we get those bits that once again hit the light. So all the nice flat edges. We don't need very much on the brush here at all. Once again, just take your time. If you have a purity seal like this one on the legs, try not to catch the inner area. Just the outer ring of the seal. If it's one with a skull in, then again, catch the top edges. But there we go. That's all we need to do with the Evil Sunz Scarlet. Now, similar to the last phase, this isn't overly required if you're happy with how the seals look at the moment, but I'll just get a little bit of Wild Rider Red. Just want to catch the very edges of those seals. So we need a very, very small amount on the brush. This is almost like a mini edge highlight. That's the purity seals done. Now, the last little bit for the purity seals, what we're not going to be doing is applying the lettering just yet. Now, the reason for this is one of the things I like to leave until the very, very end of the model, mainly just because it's similar to weathering. And any of the mistakes I make when it hit the seal will then cover the lettering, which will cause a massive issue in terms of just the neatness of the model. However, what I have is a pretty much completed Grey Knight model here, a Grey Knight Purifier, who still hasn't got any purity seals written on. There's two ways you can go about doing purity seals that I tend to find. There's firstly using brushes, which for me is a difficult method to do. You need a very fine brush and a very steady hand, or you can do what I do and just get yourself a nice thin fine liner. It does the job, and that's all that really matters. So, to apply a fine liner to this model, what we're going to want to do is identify an area that we need to draw on. We're going to be wanting to hit it with the side of the fine liner, so it looks like text. That's all we do, is tap, and then we move along like lettering. Just do a mixture between dots and lines, and that's all you need to make a purity seal look good. Just vary up between dots and lines, and it will look like text. That's purity seal pretty much done. The last thing is the books. Now you want to get roughly about 5 lines on these. So you start off here, and it's a very similar method. Just the dot, scribble the text, your dot, dot, go along a line, dot, line, dot, line, dot, 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 line, dot, line. And there you have an effective looking text. Now I tend to find sometimes on the big page here, you might want to put some lettering, but for now, because he's not a character, we'll leave it blank. Applying those last little bits to the purity seals really helps them look like they've got text on. I appreciate these are quite small models. If you fancy having a go with the brush, give it a go. What I would say is be really, really careful about touching them, because while the fine liner is drying, they're very easy to smudge. And in doing so, you might ruin the whole seal. For that's how you paint purity seals. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, definitely consider subscribing. I'll be posting more 40k related content as the weeks go by, including how to finish painting the rest of this Grey Knight model. Let me know down in the comments below what you enjoyed about the video and what models you're currently painting, as I'd love to hear. Have a good day, and remember, happy hobbying.